You're listening to the Water in Real Life podcast, the podcast for people who want to become better leaders by becoming better communicators. Why?
Because those who tell the stories rule the world.
We're your hosts, the H2 duo, Stephanie Corso
and Ariane Shipley.
So without further ado, let's get to the show. Thanks everybody for joining us. We are so excited today to be speaking with Doug Kueker. Doug is the steward of Vivayic's learning solution model, which defines Vivayic's unique approach to helping organizations use learning as a key strategy to advance their mission. In this role, he provides leadership to Vivayic's team as they work to apply their knowledge of learning and development to help build others' capacity to do good in the world. He is also a proclaimed full-time learning nerd, part-time adventure seeker, and all-around fun haver. So on brand for Rogue Water Lab and the Water in Real Life podcast. So Doug, so excited to be having this conversation with you today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And
I was just going to, I'm officially changing my bio now. I want to be a fun haver and adventure seeker.
I think you should. And for time's sake, I didn't read the full thing. It'll be on our website, but I did want to point out that Doug also has your love for the ag world and experience there as well, Ariane. So
right.
Maybe you guys could nerd out about that a little bit at the end.
Oh, cool. I didn't realize that we had that in common.
Oh, yes.
Oh, well, yeah. There we go.
So Doug is actually Tobin Redwine's boss. For all of you that are Tobin fans, Tobin Redwine has been a podcast guest and a Catalyst speaker. And so for any complaints on Tobin, just give them to Doug and he'll take care of it.
There you go.
Yes.
I've got one. I'm going to make a complaint here in a minute.
All right.
Okay, good. I'll file them away.
Thank you.
His folder is getting really big.
Gosh, I bet. Well, we're super pumped to have you here. We're really excited about just what we've learned about Vivayic so far. I mean, you're so passionate about learning that you started a company centered around the work you love. And we love that because ditto.
You do.
How do educators, quote unquote, build others' capacity to do good in the world as it states in your mission?
Yeah. I think at the heart of it all is just a belief that all people have the ability to grow and learn. And, making assumptions that, assuming good about all people, that's kind of the root of all of it, is being kind of that teacher at heart. I was trained as a teacher, as a classroom teacher, and I find that, working with adult learners is very similar in some respects to the work that we do in our classrooms.
They still spit wads and
yes, actually, adult learners can tend to be a little bit more cantankerous. It's a bit more like herding cats, to be real honest.
Everybody listening is nodding in agreement with you right now, virtually. So
they're already preach.
Yes. And then I probably put the cart before the horse a little bit, but why don't you just give us a elevator pitch on Vivayic and what you guys do?
Yeah, sure. So we design learning solutions, and that can look like upfront consulting and strategy. So a lot of times our partners will come to us with a question like, hey, we've got 5 different learning management systems and we've got 8,000 employees and we don't really have any clear picture of what learning and development needs to look like at our organization, or at least a cohesive, coherent picture of that. So we'll help them think through and do some strategy around, come up with an actual strategic plan around how do they, get to where they want to be from where they're at today. Second is, a lot of times our partners will come to us with the question of hey, we need to do a better job with onboarding our employees. And we need them to, be up to speed and performing in their role a lot faster. And so we'll help them design a program or a curriculum that will help to address that specific need. And then sometimes we just get to know really cool organizations by, the fact that they're like, hey, we need some help building out some lesson plans for educators because we want to, help them really teach agriculture, as an example, in the context of math or science or, English language arts. So our work does, cross the gamut of both corporate work as well as educational work.
Yeah.
Nice.
And everything you said really is 100% relevant to our audience. Ariane and I were both public communicators and educators. Yeah. We say that a lot, but unless you're in the sector, that may not mean anything, because we were kind of tasked with doing both the marketing communication side, but also the public education side. And I think what we mentioned in our initial conversation was that when you're a public educator for a municipality, your audience is everyone. And so like finding ways to target each of those and break those down is so important to us. And for a lot of us, for most of us, we're informal educators. Like there's certainly a number of educators in our sector who come with that formal teaching background. But a lot of us were environmental science majors or science majors who, people are like, oh, you guys know stuff and you have a good personality, so go teach people about this. And so we're just kind of thrown to the wolves mildly, even though we love being with the wolves.
Yeah, there's a huge overlap, I think, between just effective communication principles and teaching and learning. I think that teaching and learning kind of spans into being really putting some method, a little bit of method behind, like how do you unlock somebody's mental potential and such. But you have to have the supporting skills of like communicating your message effectively and being able to tell a story and really engage people. Like they're complementary.
Yeah. And then also creating promotion and marketing around the program that you create, so people know that it actually exists.
Yeah, they'll come or they'll attend or they'll participate. Yeah.
Yeah.
If there's one thing that I've learned, the you build it and they will come mentality is just that does not work.
Yeah. Dude, and we are, guilty as charged that a lot of the things that I call out, like almost 99% of the things that we call out in our industry, we call out because we did them or we were guilty of them or we like fell in the same potholes, pitfalls. I don't know what word I was going for there, but so we get it. And that's why we do that. And that's why we find the experts like you to help us kind of learn how to do it better. So
quit trying to reinvent the wheel when you've already got it,
they've got a nice wheel already. Yeah, there you go.
So our organizations, they have a shared love for building clarity. And in our introductory conversation with you, you mentioned clarity maps. Talk to us about some of the common pitfalls and how something like a clarity map can help. And what is a clarity map?
Yeah. Well, I wish I could say that we had them from the very beginning, but we didn't. It was through a lot of trial and error and lessons learned, and some of those pitfalls, falling into the pit and climbing your way back out, that we came up with this idea. We always have had the best practice of like, let's do a kickoff meeting, make sure everybody's aligned. But a lot of times it was just around the logistics of, what's the timeline, make sure we know who the contacts are and such. And so a few years ago, as we really kind of honed in and thought about like, well, what has been the recipe for success with a lot of our projects? The best projects always had a more extended, and it doesn't have to be like extended in terms of months, but like a longer period where we actually spent more time really getting to know the organization, the learners, the success metrics, how they'll judge success. And then even just like really digging into like how the solution that we've proposed actually is going to fit within the organization, because we don't offer off the shelf stuff. Like everything is going to live in a context. And so we kind of need to make sure that like we can, it's like transplanting a plant. You got to make sure that the roots will take hold and, that what you built will actually grow and thrive in that new context. And so we started this process or this practice of having what we call clarity workshops. So if it's a we're working with a brand new partner, or we're working even with just a new kind of problem within an organization, we'll start out by having a couple of dedicated sessions where we bring everybody who's involved around the table, and we just ask a ton of questions and do a lot of listening. And it's really centered around those four things, like the business need. What problem are we really trying to solve? Because there's the external problem. We need a training. We need people to be onboarded. But there's also like a lot of internal kind of considerations. And often there's hurdles that we need to be aware of. Like, gosh, we don't have really great systems. People hate going to the learning management system to try to access their learning. Or, people, we just had, a pandemic and people can't travel, and so they really understanding what are the actual underlying problems is so critical. And then the second piece is really then understanding who are the learners and what makes them tick. And we really like to focus in on like, what are their pain points as they access and engage in learning? And then more importantly, like what motivates them? What will get them excited about the program that we're proposing to build? And then, we really do hone in on like, how will success be judged at the end of the day? Will we, how will we measure success? Is it just the number of people who log in and complete this? I always encourage people to think a little bit beyond just the reach, but, like, are people actually learning, and does it translate to their workplace? And then thinking about, like I said, how's this solution going to live in the context? Those are all questions that we're asking. And then the clarity map became a tool that we use where we just summarize everything that we've learned. And we use that as a touchstone then throughout the project. So it's a one-page, simple 4-quadrant summary of those 4 areas: the business need, the learners, the solution architecture, and the success metrics. And we have that in every document that goes out that's related to, building out as we build together with the client. And it just really provides a really great touchstone to make sure we never lose sight of what our original goal was and the problem we're trying to solve and who we're actually building this for.
I love that.
I have so much to say about what
I know for everyone who's listening, you might think, cool. Like if you're if you're a vendor or you're an agency, a private company, and you're working for the utilities, you probably have some kind of form of this already. But if when you were talking about this light bulb moment came to me, like how helpful this would be if you're working inside the utility when we're facing, projects that are decades long sometimes, and change over staff, sometimes utilities change over staff. Just kidding. But having this kind of tool that keeps you focused, and just a one-pager is so great. We don't do enough one-pagers out in the world.
Yeah.
We don't need 37, just a one-pager to keep our focus and remind ourselves, why we're here and who we're here for. I love it.
Yeah. I took like a full Postit note of notes about what you just said. So, I think it's a great model to use.
Mm-hmm.
And it became kind of a way to prevent the game of telephone, I think, in our organization.
Yes.
And both in our partnership, because we spend a lot of time just interacting and building together with our partners that we work with. And, as any new person is added to the project, it just becomes one more opportunity for some of those important, like big picture details to get lost in translation. And so it really does help to keep everybody on the same page. And you're right, it does not have to be like, it's a one page. You don't even need to have a fancy template. Like literally some bolded headings would be really helpful.
Yeah.
Or Postit notes on a whiteboard. Yes.
So I think it's number one, I think that's just a great model to use for any project that you're on, to have clarity across time and people and all of that. But I think to Ariane's point, for us, we call them discovery workshops. And so I think that as utilities begin to outsource more to communications or marketing or learning system agencies to be prepared to have those kind of workshops and discussions, because it's so important for a service or something that's more subjective for us to get in a room with you and really just ask you, bombard you with questions and just let us sit and listen. It's so important. And to your point, it also helps us get more aligned with what success really looks like to you and the metrics that really matter most to you. And then we can see how those align with things that we consider best practice within our own areas of expertise. And this is going to sound like I'm complaining a little, because I'm not, because I know that there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of conversations that can happen around fixing like the request for proposal or qualifications process within government. Because a lot of those things that we really need and those questions we really need to ask in order to have a clear assessment of what you need, and of course the associated costs with that, comes from the questions that we have to ask during that discovery, which we don't get to do during that process. And so that's not saying that I'm not like complaining for us or whatever, but I just kind of want to create that clarity around there's so much more information that we need from you. And so what we offer you is like our best guess, but to be open and willing and understanding of those conversations that we need to have after whatever's rewarded, to build that clarity. And maybe there's in the future a better way that we can kind of I've really appreciated the utilities that have kind of reached out and done their own kind of research to help them build their scope and things like that first.
Very helpful.
And that's really helpful for us, because the more clear you can be on the deliverable you're asking, the better we can offer you what it is that's really going to fit your needs. So that's my RFP soapbox for the day.
There you go.
Preach about RFPs. I'm here for that content all day.
I was just going to add another bonus to these clarity, documents or templates are for the higher ups who may be not understanding what you're doing, especially those of us in that public education communication role. These things can help you, here, this is what we're focused on. This is what we're doing. Here's a 1-page summary type of thing.
Yeah.
So there's just so many benefits to having that kind of template or that kind of process in place.
Absolutely. Sure. And to your point, Stephanie, too, just because of our, today's procurement systems and practices, and how they can sometimes prohibit the exchange of information that is so critical to getting a high quality, proposal put together to actually meet the problem, not just like produce something that's going to check the box.
Yep.
But like even going through that exercise internally and then having that information available in the RFP to be able, so that when you do the, when you do the question period, which is pretty common, like that at least the people, the interested parties get a chance to like read your initial thoughts and ask maybe some additional probing questions like during that process, so that we can at least get closer to the mark.
Yeah. And I say that because I just I know it can be frustrating on both sides of, them not feeling like they're getting what they need. And then, us feeling like we don't understand what they need. And so I just want to, it's kind of my goal right now to build clarity around that and to help them be successful in it. Because ultimately we're preaching for utilities to do more communication and to utilize people that have that expertise, and to do more education and people who have that expertise. But I understand the challenges, and I just, I want to find a way to make that experience a little less painful. And so finding what we've seen for them and so for us too, selfishly, but for them, definitely, because I want them to continue to do it because they see the value in it.
And I go down some rabbit holes.
Yeah. But, so again, I'll step off my soapbox for a minute, but I just want, those folks listening to know that for most of us who are really passionate about this work and what we do, like ultimately we want to make sure that we're giving you something that is going to help you meet those needs. So Bringing it back. All right. So when we first talked, you were talking about your experience with instructional design. And so we have now donned you as an instructional design Jedi. I mean, that's what we're going to call you. So can you talk to us a little bit more about that? Like, what are the core tenets of instructional design that educators of all types can use to build successful learning programs?
Oh, good question. Well, as I was kind of thinking about this, like I think like one of the things that I think we can all agree on, and it's pretty obvious, is like attention is a prerequisite for learning. And so what I mean by that is you have got to really think about how are you going to capture your audience's attention at the very beginning of a learning experience, and probably even before that learning experience. Like there needs to be good communication coming out prior to the learning experience or a session, just so people know what to expect. And you need to hook them before they ever even walk through the door. Whether it's mandatory or it's volunteer, it's equally important. But attention only gets you so far. So, we have to have really good ways to grab and hold the audience's attention, help them understand what's in it for me. But at the end of the day, like if there isn't substance to what you are producing and you haven't been thoughtful in the design of what you're producing, you're not going to keep them there that long, because adults, they don't have time for things that are not going to be relevant and practical. And so we place a huge emphasis on application and taking time to really, not just teach about something, but to teach and offer opportunities for practice where you can get some feedback. And I think the third big thing that's so important when you're designing anything is to just always keep in mind that like a learning event, like a meeting or a workshop, is just a catalyst for learning. It's not, learning does not occur in application does not occur just in the classroom or through a self-paced course. Like there has to be some thoughtful follow-up plan. We know that there's this thing called the forgetting curve. And so, the moment that information comes in, from the moment it comes in, like there is, attrition starts. And so and then it gets like it's a pretty steep drop off from, within an hour of encountering new information. Yeah, like you've got too many things going on.
An hour, huh?
Within an
I'll
hour.
shoot for that.
You're seeing all these facial expressions because I feel like sometimes Ariane lives on the forgetting curve. So.
Is there ever not a forgetting curve? I mean, I want to go there.
Yeah, no, but there is using space learning, a space learning kind of mindset of, okay, what can we do to boost or to bring this material back up in the future, whether that's through discussions as a team, or, even short videos or podcasts, or, there's a lot of different ways that you can keep the information fresh and alive. And dropping those out, kind of dripping them out over time is just one other way to make sure that people actually take what they learned and they put it into practice. Because at the end of the day, like if we haven't got to the place where we're changing mindsets, changing behaviors, like actually getting some application of the knowledge and skills, we've probably missed the mark in doing like.
Totally. I like when you were saying this, I'm thinking, I mean, minus the fact that I already forgot what you said. I'm just kidding. I was thinking about, when I was first trying to learn, about the water treatment process at our treatment plant. And, day one, I was asked to give a tour and I had never even stepped foot in that thing. But you can tell me how the process works or give me that brochure all day long. But until I threw myself out there and went through the process with you, experienced it myself,
exactly.
Nothing really would sink in. And so we used that to that's when we expanded it to from like the kids coming to those treatment plants to adults coming, because we found that adults were just as excited as the kids were to learn about this process and the bigger picture of their water system. And so that's how we immediately started creating ambassadors who vouched for everything we did, who never questioned, I mean, you should always question government, but who never fought against us, when we said we have these big projects coming in, because they understood, like, okay, there's a lot of time that
right.
energy, money that goes into this. And I went through this. And one of our biggest ambassadors, he was the preacher at a local church. He's now the mayor of the city. So that was kind of a cool, and he still talks about his tour at the treatment plant, and he's
Cool.
a huge proponent of the water utility. And I think that is like exactly what people need to embody when they're talking about adult learning or trying to do adult learning programs.
And one of the things that I think is really important to remember, to her point about when we do those tours, is not only showing people the process of how everything works and how water gets cleaned and yada, yada, yada. But during that time, those folks also get to interact with the people there.
Yes.
And so I took a leadership tour, or a leadership group through a tour of the water treatment plant. And sure, they were like, cool, that's how our water gets treated. But more so, they were like, wow, the water department is super passionate about what they do. And that's so important for people to know.
Were we wearing like pom-poms and like running around and cheering, doing actual, yes, like we actually were, but, we were just a little passionate about it.
I didn't have pom-poms, but yeah.
And that's a good point, though, too. Like, there's nothing that replaces, in terms of learning, like nothing replaces the value of having good experience. And and also the other thing that I think sometimes we forget is that learning is a social process. It's not just something that happens in our heads, individually. It's a social process. Like, it's that transfer of information from one person to another, and internalization, and like, we're social creatures. And so our learning, is through meeting and relationship and tribe building, to be honest. There's some very, there's a lot of relationships in learning. So it's like, everything you said is not a surprise. Like, it totally impacts how people learn, and and building relationships is incredibly important in learning. So
can I ask you a rogue question you may not know the answer to?
Ruh-roh.
Well,
you're gonna test out that PhD now.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot about the PhD. So now I'm less worried. Okay. So you talked about the forgetting curve, and I wondered if you had any stats, numbers, whatever, around this idea of like habit forming or behavior change, because behavior change is obviously the end goal for us as educators. So like, and that's a really hard thing. That's the long game. Like, some people may be really inspired and instantly change something that they're doing. Hopefully that continues. But can you talk to us a little bit about like habit forming and behavior change, and how to measure that, or like see success?
Yeah, sure. Well, it just so happens that one of the areas that I kind of looked into was, it's called Tiny Habits. It's their researcher is from Stanford. His name's BJ Fogg, and I'm a huge fan of his work. He does a lot of work kind of in health behavior change, but I think there's just a ton of applicability to any field. But one thing that he really, talks about that just is really critical or crucial for success is not trying to make, like significant changes, but like more so targeting incremental change over time. And, if we want to change behaviors, like get people to recycle more, it really just means that we need to get them to take one step that gets them closer to recycling. That's not going to be like a huge hindrance on their life. Because when people encounter friction, they'll stop. Like that is like the number one barrier to habit formation and ultimately behavior change. And so trying to figure out how to create kind of frictionless steps to get people, like small steps that will help move people or nudge them in the right direction, is just so critical. And so that's where a lot of just thoughtful follow-up comes in the design of learning, I think, is like really being thoughtful about what's the ask, and knowing that each person may have like a different first step. Everybody's going to be at a different place, and being really open to designing the learning experience so that you're meeting them where they're at and not asking them to make this huge jump, but you're asking them to make something that is very sustainable in terms of a jump. So,
Yeah. So coming back to that idea of empathy and remembering where people are at. And yeah, that's a really important message to hear, because for those of us who have been doing this work for any amount of time, we forget what it was like on that first day before we were, full believers. And so now when you say don't turn the water off when you're brushing your teeth, you're like, yes, but also do this. But, someone may just be at that step of doing that. Right. And,
exactly.
At least it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit. On your website, you had mentioned how you bring your insight about art and science of learning to bear. We consider ourselves at the confluence of art and science in our own field. I want to know why bridging these disciplines of art and science together are so important to learning and inspiring change.
Yeah. You're going to take us to church there for a second.
I mean, we can go to church.
It's a water church here.
Hallelujah.
I think that, when we say that, and like, yes, there is learning as a science. Like there are, best practices and principles that will help to promote learning under certain conditions. But at the end of the day, we're also working with people, and people are messy, and how we learn is messy. And the context where we learn is, adds a messiness to it. And so that's where I think the art comes in, and you've got to, artists are constantly like just taking a fresh perspective on something, in their world, and really bringing like their genius and their creativity to that situation. And I think it's that balance between like, using the best principles and best practices for learning, and, ultimately bringing like that, bringing that artistic kind of flair to it, to make it creative, to bring it to life, give it a soul, because learning should be engaging and fun. And and that doesn't happen when you just read the bare list of principles or best practices in the literature.
So true. We have on our LLC side, we pride ourselves that, she and I are the water nerds that will bridge that translation gap or whatever. But it's really, really important to us to not bring in people from the industry to be the designers and stuff, but to bring the experts from the advertising and marketing world who are geniuses, like you say, in their own right, and bring them in to give us that fresh perspective. I can't tell you how many times our creative team has been like, okay, ladies, there's enough water drops. I'm going to take those out and do this. And we're like, oh, for that end user, so.
Well, I love that you say, give it a soul. Like, I love that, because for me, now I understand that we, the water nerds, we bring the heart, and our artists bring the soul. Yes. And I think you need both of them to really make that impact that you're looking for. But I also love that this really gives a lot of validation and credence to us who, our industry is very, it's engineering, it's mathematics, it's science. And so when you talk about communication and learning and things that are deemed as soft skills, it's just, no, there's a lot of science to this as well. And I think the two pair well together. Yeah.
Didn't Brene Brown, I'm just remembering something. Sometimes my forgetful curve comes back. But I do think that it was a Brene Brown, and she said that storytelling was data with a soul. Did I nail that? Yes.
You did.
I love it. I love it.
Yes.
Exactly right.
Okay. So let's end with some nuts and bolts here, because this was
Okay.
one of the most important questions I wanted to ask you, knowing that so many of us are tasked with teaching both run the gamut, all ages and demographics and such. What are some of the biggest misconceptions there are out there about adult learning? And then what are some ways we can do it better?
Yeah. Well, I'd say one misconception is that, because everybody's been to school, high school, or maybe even college, or, some form of post-secondary education like that, we're all experts at what it means to learn and what effective learning looks like. And I can almost certainly tell you, like, I'm sure I had some fabulous teachers, and I know I learned a lot from many of those teachers about what effective teaching and learning looks like. But at the end of the day, when we're designing learning for adults, and especially if we're doing like consumer education or outreach and education, like, it's a different ball game, because we are competing now for their mind space, and we can't approach it in exactly the same way that we did with classroom education that was compulsory. Like, you are going to sit in the seat, and I think that that's so important for you to keep in mind, is like, and it goes back to what I said earlier, is like, you've got to catch their interest. You've got to find ways to hook them early and keep them with you, and make sure you've got substance that's going to justify the investment of their time.
And
I think
snacks.
also, what's that?
I said, and snacks.
And snacks. Yes. Yes. Never hurts to also have a drawing for something. Gift cards can go a long way. The other thing that I think is a huge misconception is that, like, you're working with a blank slate, and that is definitely not true when it comes to adult learners. You are working with someone who has years of experience doing something a certain way, and you. And they also they think that they know how, or why they're doing things a certain way. And so you've got to be really respectful of the experience, the baggage that they bring into the learning experience, and recognize that, like, you may also need to do some unlearning of bad habits, or bad, or unlearning of misconceptions, to be honest, in order to create that space where they have the need to fill the gap, between what they have been doing and the better way that you're trying to show them.
So to do a cross section of that with some of the work that we talk about, we work with a neuroscience researcher who focuses on storytelling. His name is Kendall Haven, and he talks kind of about the baggage he calls the banks of prior knowledge. And so for us, the same thing happens when communicating. We all have these different kind of banks of prior knowledge. And so the way that we interpret things that we hear or are communicated to us, we interpret differently because of those different perceptions. And that, to your point about the gaps, for us, when we're communicating, if we're not filling in those gaps, they're going to just take something from that bank of previous knowledge and plug it in to fill that gap. And who knows what that might be, and if it's accurate. And so just another reason why clarity is so important in making sure that we're not leaving those gaps, because for whatever reason, our brains tend to be a little negative. And so when we do fill in those gaps, they skew a little more negative versus, oh yeah, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Like, that very rarely happens.
Exactly.
Nice.
So true.
Well, this has been awesome. Thank you for going down some tangents with us. But before we let you go, we just had one more question that we asked. We asked this question of all of our guests. And I'll give a little context. As you know, Ariane and I did public education and communication. And so a lot of times we would have people say, well, what difference does it make if I make a change? I'm just one person. I'm not going to make a significant impact. And of course, we wholeheartedly disagree with that, because we believe that change can be contagious, and you never know what your choices may inspire in others. So what's the one call to action that you're most passionate about that you think could ultimately change the world?
Oh man. I just think investing in other people and investing in their capacity as a citizen, an employee, like what a way to just demonstrate like how much you care, and I think that that's something that a lot of the organizations that we work with, like it's about it making an investment that demonstrates like, hey, I care about you and I want to help you develop to be the best version of yourself. Or I want to help our consumers, understand and be the best version of themselves. And so I just think like shifting the mindset from like just delivering information to people and really thinking about it like a true investment in others is like such an important mindset to have as an educator, public educator, teacher, trainer, whatever you call yourself. It's just so important.
I love that. That's the essence of Catalyst. Yeah. I love it.
I mean, it's super cliche, but knowledge is power. And so, investing in people to make them more informed really is empowering them to be their best selves. So I agree. I agree with your call to action.
That one. Yeah.
Nice.
But well, I passed the test.
You passed the test. You can come back. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us about a topic that's really important to all three of us, and really appreciate that. And as always, thank you for letting us continue to work with Tobin. We're glad that we get to, we grew a family with Vivayic. So thank you for that. But thanks for taking the time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
We are so grateful for each and every one of you, all the members of our listening community. The Water in Real Life podcast is a Rogue Water Lab original. It's hosted by the H2 duo. That's us, Stephanie Corso and Ariane Shipley. It's produced by Rogue Water Lab, 12 Midnight, and Matte Black Sound. Sound design and music by Andre Black and Matt McNeil of Matte Black Sound.
For more Water in Real Life, check out our YouTube channel and sign up for our lab notes. You can find both at roguewaterlab.org.